There's been many a times I've seen a computer says, waiting to be rebooted to apply this patch. And you look and it's like, not been rebooted in 248 days. And I'm like, dude, come on. It's not being patched.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax, HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to episode 431 of the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. My name's David Sims of HIPAA for MSPs. Joining me is Donna Grindle, on location somewhere. Key West, I think, right?
No, Miami.
Oh.
I was in Key West. I had to bring my
Gotcha.
friend to the ER in Miami.
Wow,
So-
really? You have to, surely there's hospitals closer.
There are, and they said you need to go to Miami because they don't have a lot of stuff. That's a little bitty. The Lower Keys
Yeah.
Medical Center is awesome if you get stung they're not equipped for big things, so we have to come up here.
Okay. Well, welcome to Miami.
I haven't enjoyed it very much at all. Not
Yeah,
going to do much of anything.
The last time I went through Miami, or around Miami, I guess you could say, I realized that the posted speed limit was merely a suggestion. I literally think I was doing 90 miles an hour and getting past like I was sitting still.
Yeah, and
It's so
four-way
crazy.
stops. Four-way stops is who's the most aggressive driver, not who got there first. Who's the most aggressive driver, and sometimes the most expensive car. Because I saw a Rolls Royce almost knock a Toyota Corolla off the road.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, I'm just gonna go back and forth between the hotel and the hospital. I'm not venturing far.
Yeah, no kidding. Wouldn't either. So today we're going to be covering 10 cybersecurity misconfigurations, which I think is very, very good topic to cover because most people don't realize that they have misconfigurations until there's an incident and they're like, oh, wait a minute, this wasn't
You mean
configured
it
properly
set up
or
right?
not at all. Yeah, or not at all. So this is going to be a report that we'll go over from NSA and CISA. It's going to cover some of those things that they find when they do the red team, blue team stuff. So I love learning from other people, especially, so I don't have to make my own mistakes and figure that out. But misconfigurations is a big problem. And it's everything from somebody didn't configure it properly to they turned something off and forgot to turn it back on, or turn something on, didn't turn it back off, or shadow IT even.
Yeah.
Get in there and do things. So it's just a lot of stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to that topic for today. So I want to say thank you to those people who share, like, subscribe, give us reviews, all those things. We appreciate it.
And our donors.
And lastly, but not leastly, to our donors. Thanks a lot. If you're interested in being one of those folks, you can go to helpmewithhipaa.com. Tons of information there, but you can also be a donor if you want to send a few dollars our way to help pay for Donna's trips to the Key West. Well, anyway. All right, so let's dive into our very first thing, which is our HIPAA briefs, and let's answer a very common question that you and I get, which is, why doesn't the security rule tell me exactly what to do?
I know. We get that a lot. Can't it just tell me exactly what to do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's kind of like saying that, every single doctor's office should do the exact same thing as a major medical center. That's what it would have to, so, and clearly it wouldn't be enough for the medical center to do what you need in the single doctor office. So that's why it doesn't tell you exactly what to do, but it tells you the things you need to accomplish, the outcomes that you need to get to, and they can't be specific due to the size, complexity of the industry it is regulating.
Right.
However, it also allows it to be very flexible, and it hasn't had to change because it says figure out your risks and manage them appropriately. And as your risks change and the threats change, it's been able to adapt, but it does need work, and we all know it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, it's not going to tell you exactly what to do, because I couldn't give you a list and say you should do exactly these things in every single location. It's just impossible.
Yeah. Well, this comes back to your risk assessment, and then doing your risk management plan, and then just working the plan. I had a conversation earlier this week, actually, with somebody, and they were basically saying, we want to implement the things that we need to implement for the security rule. I'm like, great, fantastic. When's the last time you had a risk assessment done? And they're like, I said, okay. So I'll ask the next question that I know the answer to. What does your risk management plan look like? And then of course the response was, can't we just implement the security stuff? And I'm like, well, we can throw a bunch of security stuff at your organization, but we're not working the plan, and we don't have a plan because we don't know where your risks are. We don't even know where your data is that we're trying to protect. So we have to go through all that to get to where you want to be. Otherwise, we're kind of doing it backwards, which I see a lot, unfortunately. We're trying to do it backwards. So step one, let's do your SRA, and then we'll go from there. And yeah, they're looking at me like, but we just want the end result.
Sorry. It's kind of like saying that, the big dams that hold back all the water and create the huge lakes, or the ones, that are, managing locks and all. They all have to be managed exactly the same way. You repair them the same way. You do. No. Because some have different environments, some have different kinds of weather, some have different sizes, shapes. So you can't do that, and you're still trying to hold back a huge volume of threats.
Yeah.
So unless you want to be running around putting your finger in the little holes.
Yeah, you run out of fingers.
Real quick.
Yeah. But that's why the security rule doesn't tell you exactly what to do. So it's for me, and this is what I've always explained to folks, is I'm glad it doesn't tell me exactly what to do, because then I'm dealing with potentially a problem in the fact that the organization can't afford it, or it doesn't really need it. And so we're addressing things that's not necessary. It's not reasonable, whatever the case might be. I'm glad it gives us that flexibility to look at it and say, this is the outcome we're trying to get to. You just need to figure out how you're going to get there.
Indeed, my friend. Indeed.
All right. So let's dive into our topic for today and talk about the NSA and CISA red and blue teams sharing their top 10 cybersecurity misconfigurations.
Yeah, I like the right there at the top, it says, a plea for network defenders and software manufacturers to fix common problems.
Yeah.
A plea. We're begging you. So, if you are a network defender, and if you have a network, you're a network defender. Because everybody's on the cybersecurity team, right?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yep.
So, do you want to? I think we'll go through each of them one at a time. But before we do that, I'm going to just kind of hit what their summary is, and then we'll just hit the 10 misconfigurations. Because they point out these misconfigurations illustrate, one, a trend of systemic weaknesses in many large organizations, including those with mature cyber postures. So, all the people that I'm sure the big organizations have it down pat. Nyeh. The importance of software manufacturers embracing secure by design principles to reduce the burden on network defenders. So properly trained, staffed, and funded network security teams can implement the known mitigations for the weaknesses. Software manufacturers must reduce the prevalence of these misconfigurations, thus strengthening the security posture for customers by incorporating secure by design and default principles and tactics into their software development practices.
Yep. Well, the very first one, having the properly trained, staffed, and funded network security teams.
Yeah.
You
We
know,
were just talking about that.
yeah, you got to change your stinking thinking about, I got a guy, he knows
Yeah.
how to do something that you think's amazing, and therefore he's a genius. Gosh, so many times my 12-year-old such and such is a computer whiz and he can manage our network. And I'm like, oh, come on.
Well, yeah, I mean, they've set up tons of networks for us. Okay. Are they secure? Please.
Yeah.
Because we talked repeatedly, IT and security are not the same thing.
No, they're not. And it's just hard. I think we'll be preaching that for the next 25, 30 years. So
You might be.
Yeah.
I'm going to be done by then.
I'm going to be AI by then.
Yeah. I'm working on that.
Yep.
So let's explain what red and blue teams are, David.
Okay. So in essence, you have a defender and an attacker. So your red team are the ones that are attacking, and your blue teams are the ones that are defending. So just think of it like flag football back in the day. You had a red team and a blue team. Yeah. And in fact, if you watch, like I love watching MMA fighting. So the UFC, if you pay attention, there's always one guy who has red tape on the gloves and the other guy has blue tape. So it's literally still red team, blue team.
So the red team is the attacking team. The blue team is the defending team.
Right.
And so they literally put you on either side of a network and see how it works out.
Mm-hmm.
And the blue team is trying to stop the red team, and the red team is finding vulnerabilities everywhere they can and attacking them. And it's a pretty interesting exercise for any network that believes that they've got it, done. And so they do that on these large networks. And so if they're finding these very not complicated problems on the large networks that the red team is able to attack and the blue team has to close or lose, which nobody wants to lose, then if they're finding it on these large networks and they're pretty straightforward things, they're all very common things that we talk about frequently, then it's happening on the smaller ones and the medium ones. So that's why we felt like it would be a good time to discuss them.
Mm-hmm.
So, number one, default configurations of softwares. Okay, we're off to a good start. Software and applications. And I bring that one to our customers all the time because they're like, well, IT did my risk assessment last year, so can't they just do it again? And I say, well, did they look into the configuration of your EHR? What about your other line of business applications? Have they evaluated the software and how you have it configured? Did they do that? Oh, no, they don't touch that. I mean, do you touch all of those applications, David?
No, I mean, not unless it's specifically within the scope of what we're talking about, but not on a ongoing basis. No, we don't do that.
Yeah, so we ask, what are your critical business applications so that we can go see how they're secured, because they're the ones that you're putting all the data in and doing all the work on.
Mm-hmm.
And if you leave defaults, it ain't going to be pretty.
No, and we've talked before about the default credentials. Most people kind of understand, if you got something that you're putting in place, change the default passwords, change the default usernames, whatever. But what we often don't talk about is changing the default configurations. So let's look at the settings. Like, I don't know about you, but when I get a new piece of software, the very first thing I do is go into the settings. Like, I want to see every single setting that's available to me and then make a determination as to whether or not I want to change them or know more about them, because sometimes I'm like, I don't know what this does. What does this do? Push this button.
Click that.
But,
let's don't click that again.
Right. But, most of the time, software, when it comes to security, they're looking at it saying, well, we can put some security in place, but we don't know exactly what level of security that every person who purchases our software wants to do. So we need to do something that's very basic. And so if it has anything at all, it's going to be very basic. And then you need to determine what you want to do with it from there. So that's why you need to look at these things. What are your service permissions, your software permissions, your configuration permissions and settings, and then make determinations based on your organization.
Well, and like there's one of the things that software vendors have gotten better about this, but it used to be an easy thing to do is you'd make a default profile with all kinds of permissions, and then you would run all the background services using that login. And it could do everything. And it had a default. So if you ever learned it, it didn't change what that username and password was. And it was, no one even knew it was configured on their servers. They've gotten better at that, but that doesn't mean it's all there. Like, I think one time you had a call where the software vendor wanted you to give their profiles complete control of everything on every computer, including the C drive, so that it could do whatever it wanted.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm like, no.
What do you think about that? No.
But in this case, they were literally saying our software will not function properly unless you do that. And I'm like, this is terrible. This is terrible.
Yeah, and so that was several years ago. Hopefully that vendor's out of business or has fixed their practices.
One would hope.
One would hope. So I think that it's something that's very often overlooked. And whether it's QuickBooks or your Microsoft Office configurations, it's everything should be evaluated, and you cannot assume that it is properly secured for you, because it needs to be secured in the manner that fits your environment, which is why the security rule doesn't tell you how to secure everything. Boom.
Yeah. Yep.
Right.
So here's a few ways, just in that default credentials category, here's a few ways that malicious actors and assessment teams can abuse the default credentials, just so you understand. So one is they can find credentials in a simple web search, and they can use that to gain access through authentication to the device. Another way is they can reset the built-in administrative accounts using predictable forgotten password questions. We love those.
Yeah.
Another one, leveraging default VPN credentials for internal network access. Leveraging publicly available setup information to identify built-in administrative credentials for web applications to gain access. And then leveraging default credentials on software deployment tools so that you can execute code. So those are some of the areas that they find most often that get attacked.
Yeah, and it just keeps going. The hits just keep on coming.
Yeah.
But it goes, like I said, it's the insecure Active Directory, insecure legacy protocols. They'll use something that people stopped using and nobody went and turned it off on. It's not like somebody made a decision. It's just always been that way and no one went and turned it off.
Yep.
So they're not looking. There's a lot of those areas, and then you get how it works within Active Directory. That's where it gets a lot more technical. We don't dig into those, but it involves things like web enablement and enrollment rights and all of those kind of things that you could trigger based on some of these default configurations.
Yeah. This is probably also a good time to say, if you're migrating to the cloud, let's just say you have an on-prem server and you're moving to a cloud server. You're not getting rid of anything more than the hardware.
Yeah.
You still have software, you still have security, you still have configurations, you still have all the risk, if not different or more, in some cases, risks that are there. So you can't say, well, we're just going to move to a cloud server and therefore we don't need to have these other things in place to monitor, manage, protect, all that. No, you absolutely do need them. So you can't say there's no more risk or there's no more security necessary. You're only removing the fact that you're not having to buy that hardware anymore.
Right. And, some people will be like, well, we moved to cloud and we had all these problems, so it's not that much more secure. And that's not it. That's not what it gives you less to manage yourself, but it doesn't automatically make you secure.
Right. Yeah.
And remember that when you're in the cloud, you still are running a browser or some sort of client on your device to access the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And the browser needs to be secured, and the default configurations on the browsers can sometimes cause you problems as well. So.
Yeah. Again, goes back to that assessment piece.
Huh.
All right. So number 2, and you would think that this is something that we shouldn't have to keep talking about, but number 2 is improper separation of user and administrative privileges. So, don't use your administrator accounts as a user account, and don't have 30 different administrators when you have a network of 20 people.
I hate that one.
It's like, make everybody an administrator, or the business owner often, I need to be an administrator. Well, you can have an administrative account, but you can't have your daily driver account be an administrator account.
Unless that's all you do all day long is administer.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't. So
yeah.
Usually what it boils down to is, well, I couldn't install this software, and so I'm just going to use my administrator account for the once a month that I need to install this update or something.
It really should be something that you log in with the privileges you need to do your job. Just like minimum uses and disclosures. It works the same way.
Yep.
And it is something that often becomes surprising to people that they didn't even know they were sometimes an administrator. Somebody made them that because they were bothering them because they wanted to do something sometimes. Or It was supposed to be temporary and then turn it off.
So 3 different areas you can look at here are excessive account privileges, elevated service account permissions, and then thirdly, non-essential use of elevated accounts. So those are 3 things to look at.
And the service account, whenever they're talking about service account, they mean those background things that you don't know are actually running. It's the things when you get the call from Microsoft and they tell you to go, and that's the one, where they talk you through stuff. I love that one. And, you just sit there and type I'm not even at a computer. I just make out like I know, because I know what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, the event viewer, and it's showing you all the services. You're shocked by all that because you had no idea all that was happening.
Yeah.
So,
Number 3, insufficient internal network monitoring. Because who needs that, right?
Well,
Yeah. So, there's one thing to have monitoring this happening, but there's the other piece of it too is somebody's got to be looking at that. So, what is being monitored? And
yes.
There's a difference between we provide network monitoring or we provide server monitoring or whatever, but who's monitoring the monitoring?
Yeah, I would say this is the reason that we say you need to have regular reports showing you what's going on. And if there are alerts, you want documentation of what was done, who handled it, or what's being done. That's why you actually have to look at these kinds of.
Yeah. So sometimes we see things where, for example, the endpoints are being monitored, but not the network as a whole is not being monitored. So again, you have to look at all of it. And I know with the whole work from home thing and all that, or people working in different locations, some of that can be more complicated because people aren't stuck in a network anymore. They're all over the place. But you still have the ability, and you should utilize the ability when you're inside of a network to look at that and figure out how you're going to handle that. Because if you got somebody working from home, they're still on a network. They're just not within the network that you are providing to protect their practice.
Yeah, I love one of these. So they talked about where it's host-based monitoring. So it tells you if there's something on a host, but it's not on the network. And it was like, in this example, the organization could only identify infected hosts, but could not identify where the infection was coming from, and thus could not stop future lateral movement infections. So don't you love it whenever they say, yeah, we had a cyber attack, but they cleaned the network and restored, we're good? No, you're not. No.
Yeah.
Unless you've checked everything, you're not.
Yeah, it's like we come home and the house is ransacked, but we don't know how they got in. But we went ahead and changed all the locks on the doors and windows. We still don't know how they got in.
No.
So you don't know if you fixed anything.
And then the other piece was that this one is actually an example where the red team gained persistent, deep access to a large organization with a mature cyber posture. So we're not talking small. They were able to get in deep, and the organization did not detect the assessments team's lateral movement, persistence, and command and control activity, including when the team attempted, quote, noisy activities to trigger a security response. So they even tried, and they didn't detect them.
Wow.
They tried to make you see them. So it shows you, just because it's a large organization that's doing its thing does not mean that it's all good.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes you don't know what you don't know, and this is why you do these tests. But this is kind of one of those things that they probably did really good protecting the organization from something getting in, but once it got in, it's just like there's nothing. Like you're in.
Yeah. You're hanging out with the rest of us, doing whatever you want.
Yep. You can do whatever you want. And this is why physical pen testing is so valuable as well, because maybe I can't get in from the outside, but if I can walk in the door and I can plug in something, or if I can cause you to take a USB drive inside the organization or something like that, once I'm inside, I'm good. And
that's what you don't want. That's why I tell everybody, and they're like, oh, we're protected, nobody's coming in. I was like, not today. Yeah. No, today you have to assume they're going to get in, and what happens if they get in?
Yeah, same thing with like business email compromise. Once they're in that account, they're on the inside. There's a lot of things they can do. If the configurations aren't set up properly, a lot of things they can do.
Oh yeah, they set up all kinds of rules that forward things to them. They delete things and move things, and you don't even know they're still in there.
All right, number 4, lack of network segmentation. This is where you take and separate portions of your network and set up the boundaries. And most people know this as like kind of a guest network. So you walk in and you try to connect somewhere and, here's a guest network. But there's more segmentation that can happen than just that. So
that needs to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So for us, we usually have a network segmentation for business use, a network segmentation for employee use, a network segmentation for guest use. And then oftentimes there's other segmentations, like, for example, if they have VoIP, then we segment VoIP and things like that. So there's usually anywhere from 3 to 5 different segmentations by default that we implement.
Well, and another example they talk about is the OT environments, which now you need the HVAC vendor wants to be able to connect. Okay, well, you don't want them on your network with all of your other traffic, so they need their own segment.
Right. Well, here's the problem that we run into that I talked about earlier about shadow IT is, your HVAC guy comes in the door and they're like, yeah, we need your Wi-Fi password because we need to connect all of our thermostats. And sure enough, somebody says, well, here it is. Here's our Wi-Fi password. And they give them the one, to their business network, not the IoT or the employee or whatever. And now all of a sudden, you completely violated the network segmentation piece. And introduce a lot of risks to security, privacy, and everything else, all because somebody gave out the wrong information. So it's a challenge.
Yes. That's like at my house, there are 4 segments, 4 different virtual networks. One for the business, one for IoT, one for other kinds of secure things. So like I don't have my vacuum robot on the same network with my security system. So there's 2 different IoTs, and I can swap back and forth between my business network and any of those others should I need to do something. But I've got it configured so the business traffic sits on one, I have a guest one, I have an IoT one for all the miscellaneous stuff, and then I have my secure one for the things that manage the house, or there's the streaming that some parts go. So we're doing that at home, me and you. And if we're doing it at home, small business should be doing it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So check out your network segmentation. Make sure you have that in place, because that is definitely one of the problems that people have that they're not looking at. So number 5, oh man, do we talk about this one a lot?
Yes.
Poor patch management.
Yes.
So, vendors are all the time are releasing patches and updates to address security vulnerabilities. And when I say all the time, I mean all the time. Constantly. And patch management is one of those things where you're looking at, okay, what patches are available? What security vulnerabilities are out there? What critical vulnerabilities could be exploited? And then coming up with a cadence and a plan to implement those patches, because, patches can break things, as we know. But there seems to be, according to this report, there's a lack of regular patching. And there's also a use of unsupported operating systems and outdated firmware.
Yes. That's the one that drives us nuts.
Yeah. I had somebody call earlier this week, and fortunately not healthcare, but they said, we're looking to update our Microsoft Office to the newest version. I'm like, fantastic. And what do you have right now? And they were like, Office 2010. It's like, what? They were like, well, why would we need to update it before now? And I'm like, like, this thing's not supported, hadn't been supported for years. Like, any vulnerability in this software, you just leaving it hanging out there for anybody to get to.
Exactly.
And they're completely oblivious to it. Like, the only thing they're thinking is the software works.
Yes. I don't need it to do more.
Right. They're not looking at the security aspect. They're just looking at, can I type my documents up? Can I use the spreadsheets or whatever? That's all they care about. No.
Yeah. So that is a key element, because a lot of times they'll think, well, it's just the computers I have to worry about, not the applications themselves.
Right.
And it's not. I mean, if the applications aren't being supported, it's no different. Your operating system is an application. No different than another application. It just serves a different purpose.
Yep. But so look at your regular patching, look at your operating system patching. Just because you might have it set up to automatically patch, automatically update, there's been many a times I've seen a computer says, waiting to be rebooted to apply this patch. And you look and it's like, not been rebooted in 248 days. And I'm like, dude, come on. It's not being patched. You've got to reboot. Or a patch gets hung up. I've seen them error out. Like they won't apply. And so you have to start the process all over again. And you have to do that manually. There's so much about patching and this is one of those areas that's easy to solve for, but hard logistically to do.
Yeah, because you can't just assume that it is actually working unless you're checking.
Right. Yep.
And patch everything, not just some things. Everything.
Yep. Well, people default to the set it and forget it mindset, and you just can't do that in IT.
No, not at all. All right, number
Number
6.
Number
Go
6,
ahead, you go.
bypassing of system access controls.
Yeah, this one's a deep in there, little tricky thing.
Yeah, you compromise the alternative authentication methods within an environment, and then you're good. You're in. So that's collecting hashes in a network. They can use that to authenticate, and pass the hash is another one that they can use. They can mimic accounts without having a clear text password. So more complicated, but still something that can be done.
Well, in the Kerber roasting, where was it? What did I see it? It's at the end.
Yeah. Kerber roasting is also known as one of the most time-efficient ways that they can elevate privileges, and they can move laterally throughout your network by doing that.
Yeah, so this one's very complicated, but it goes back if you're doing all the other things properly. Hopefully, this one wouldn't be as prevalent in a smaller network as it would in.
Yeah. So this is where, we talk about user access controls. This one is system access controls. So look at systems, and should systems communicate with other systems, those types of things. And that's a more complicated thing to do. And I know some smaller environments maybe don't use this, but it's something to consider for sure. Should these computers be talking to these other computers?
Well, we do that with some of those medical devices that use out-of-date software that isn't patched and you can't patch, and you segment it and you only let it talk to certain devices. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So, number 7.
Number 7 is weak or misconfigured MFA methods. So that's an interesting one because, you and I, when I talk about MFA, and all my clients, when I talk about MFA, I'm talking about using some type of authenticator app, or it's sending a text message or something. That's typically our MFA of choice. But some organizations, some environments have smart cards, they have tokens, and, they have other ways to have MFA happen.
Yeah, so if those aren't configured, and then you also have the lack of phishing resistant, which, what do they call it? Push bombing.
Yeah, there's so many things, man. I can't even keep up with some of the ones anymore.
Yeah, and you got the SIM swapping, and now that we have software SIMs, I'm going to see it's way more convenient. But so those little cards that you used to have to put into your phone, we don't need those anymore. The newer ones, it'll be a software thing that gets updated, but that means it's a software thing that can get changed. So it's going to be more prevalent. But that's about phishing resistant MFA. So they can trick you to give the code. That's a thing. So that's why you have to ask the questions and not assume. And that's why we don't want the SMS versions.
Yep. Number 8, insufficient ACLs on network shares and services.
Everybody needs access to that. I don't want to have to worry who can get to what folder. Just let everybody get access to the share on the server.
Yeah.
No,
probably not.
And if you do that, those shares and the services that allow that to happen, you're just opening it up, because then it's just like the attacker gets in, sits there and watches the network for a while and figures out where everything is.
Mm-hmm.
They build a map, and they just scan all the computers, find all the shares, and go, boop. It's not something that, I know how to share things. Let me share this.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah. And, once you get in, there are freely available tools, and sometimes even parts of the operating system will let you scan and ping for computers and look for ports and discover shares and all that. So, it's not like they necessarily have to come in and trick you into installing something that gives them the ability to see further. I mean, it's just an inherent part of the operating system. It's tools that are already there.
Mm-hmm. They call that living off the land.
Mhm.
Whatever's already there, I can use it to do whatever I need to do. All right. Number
Number
9.
9.
Woohoo.
This is another one where I'm surprised that we're still talking about it, but yet not.
It drives me nuts.
Poor credential hygiene. So easily crackable passwords or easily guessed passwords, clear text passwords, in a disclosure. So yeah, I mean, it's just, come on, folks, use better credentials.
All the people that say, "Oh, I keep all my passwords in a spreadsheet or a document," or "Don't worry, I've buried that in a configuration." No, make it stop, because if you can read it, they can read it. And no, just a password protected Word document, probably not going to do it.
Oh no, absolutely. It's fairly easy to get past the password protected document. So the other thing is the length of the password changes. So used to is like needs to be at least 8 characters, and then at some point it needs to be at least 12 characters. Now I think you're looking at probably 16 to 24 characters is kind of what you need
Yeah.
anymore, and this is why we've gone from saying passwords to passphrases, because it's a lot easier to remember that. But I'm
Mhm.
still seeing things where people are doing stuff like, I've got a really great password, but every time I need to create a new password or change that password, I'm adding something to it that's guessable. So I got
Yeah.
this fantastic password, but I'm just adding another exclamation point to the end.
Or one.
Oh, yeah, or a 1, and then a 2, and then a 3, or I'm doing a password where I'm incorporating a part of that password that is easily guessable for everything else. So let's just say I have amazing password at Amazon.com. And then I have amazing password at South Carolina Department of Revenue.com or whatever. So it's like as soon as somebody sees 1 or 2 passwords, they're like, oh, I see what they're doing now. And so, you basically have the same password everywhere, because it doesn't take much for somebody to figure out, okay, you're using this portion of a password and then connecting it to wherever you're going to create your new password. So to me, it's just the same password.
Well, and it's not like there's actually a person sitting there going, "Let me guess another one." That's not what happens. There's a program running, hitting them so fast, and it's figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
It's, it's evaluating what the data is that it's finding. So,
right. And then, of course, let's throw the AI conversation in there and say, look, with AI, it's going to look at it and go, based on what we're seeing, this is probably what's happening. And here's the passwords that should probably be tried on this account. And here you go. Let's try them.
Yeah, it'll automatically generate, here's the pattern we expect to see.
Right. Yep. So pattern recognition. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be tough. And then number 10, unrestricted code execution, as if that wasn't bad enough. So yeah, you can have unverified programs that are allowed to execute on the host machines, and they can run arbitrary code and malicious payloads within the network. And you've given them access to do that.
That's how a lot of the phishing things get launched, because they're running code that isn't verified in any way. Now, I'm not saying that all of the code that they run can be, there's some that it looks like real stuff. But there are ways that you can make sure that most of it you would detect that it's not real stuff, that it's bad stuff.
Right.
So
there's your 10 things. So there's a lot. We'll have links to this. There's a lot of different mitigations that this covers, and for you folks that are network defenders and such, you can go take a look at that. But it covers looking at different frameworks to roll out. And by the way, if you're not using some type of framework, if you're just kind of willy-nilly throwing stuff at your environment, that's not, used to be okay. Let's just say that. It used to be okay to say, I'm paying for security. It's no longer is that the default standard. Now it's you need to have a framework that you're looking at, that you're rolling out, that you can prove you're doing these things, and you're constantly monitoring these things. Gone are the days where we could just pay for security.
It's not happening anymore.
No. So go take a look at all that. Anything else before we wrap up?
Oh, no. I'm already thinking I should go check the blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. That's the good thing about doing the podcast is sometimes we get to the end of it, we're like, okay, let's go check this out in our own environments, see what's happening.
All of a sudden I thought of something.
Yeah. Well, it's like you said earlier, you never want to assume. And even when you've checked something, it's not a bad idea to go back and check it again because you never know. We have seen times when an update changed something, turned something off or turned something on. You never know. It might not be human related. So there you go. All right, folks, thanks for listening. Be sure to join us again next week. Remember to follow us and share us out on your favorite social media site. And for Donna and myself, just remember, HIPAA's not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.